businesses in the city of Elma should be able to sell cannabis to people who are over the age of 21, because again, it is legal in Michigan now. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
Who would like to be next? Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Wheeler. Oh, God, that was my dad. Somebody did point out that my picture's on the front of this thing. You'll see the one there in the top left corner. So. In any case, Jim Wheeler, here representing Greater Gratiot tonight and some others, but what we are kind of making our go around is that there are 3 millages that are up for renewal at the August primary, which is the August the 2nd. The first one would be the senior village, which provides Meals on Wheels and a lot of other senior services that's highlighted in this brochure. And by the way, this brochure is for factual information. It doesn't promote how to vote. So the same thing. I'm not out and telling anybody how to vote or how I think to vote. We just want to provide information for everybody. So kind of try to divide and conquer amongst the groups. So the first proposal will be the like I say, the Commission on Aging, and their budget, it is huge. It's 72% of their budget is funded through this millage, so it is a big thing. Again, all of these are renewals, no increases whatsoever with any of them across there. The third proposal on there is the county libraries, which we had 6 of them in our county. I think a lot of us figured out, especially during the pandemic, how important it was to have access to libraries for internet, other pieces of it, but they do provide a very needed thing across our county and uses for our library system. The middle one, proposal 2, and the second I'll introduce Bill from MSU, is we split with that. MSU Extension and Greater Gratiot split the proposal 2. It's split 1/3 goes to MSU for theirs and 2/3 comes to Greater Gratiot for our operations. A little bit of highlights of some of the things that Greater Gratiot's been involved in since 1978, but the total projects now that we've been able to track and we've had some kind of dealing with, sometimes it was a major input, sometimes somewhat minor, is a $1.7 billion of investment in our county. So it's pretty significant. And to our calculation right now, the net jobs of people that are working in here of companies that we've been involved with is just shy of 6,000 employees. Big number from those standpoints. Attribute a lot of that still to Don Scher, who did it for an awful lot of years, and now kind of following in behind Don's footsteps. And Casey Zahner, who's following in along mine, who's a homegrown person, homegrown out in college, and very adaptable to coming in. Somebody pointed out last night, if you need something done, don't call Jim, call Casey. That would be really good advice. I will definitely make that. But in any case, want to get out, just make sure people understand that there is a millage out there, and these 3 are up for renewals, and so you have that. With that, I'd like to introduce Bill Hendren, who is our MSU Extension, and he can talk a little more about MSU from that standpoint. Thanks, Jim.
Hi everyone, Bill Hendren, District 8 Director, and our office is right down at 219 State Street, and it's a city building. I'm very happy to be there, and I know I've worked with Eric in the past. And we're not going to ask to double our time because there's 2 of us, so I just want to connect a couple dots, okay? Because it's interesting, because it's on the ballot August 2nd, and we are connected, first of all, to Greater Gratiot in regard to that proposal, so that's important to know. Second of all, a lot of people are familiar with the fact that MSU Extension has, as part of its education programs, 4-H. So many of you may have youth who have been involved, you yourselves may have been involved in 4-H. Some are familiar with the fact that we're involved in agriculture. Others may not know we have health and nutrition education or community development education, and thus the connection is very good. And I'm just going to pass around a couple things. I didn't bring enough for everybody, but I just wanted you to see them. But one thing Eric mentioned tonight is the Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities Conference. I dare say that someone could go through the village, pass or fail, that's up to the voters, but go through and then come to this conference and not realize at the time of the conference that this is an MSU Extension in the background conference. So I just wanted to pass that. You can take a look at that. You can keep that. We have other innovative programs like Farm Stress. So that's one of the things we've got in our office, educators that deal with social emotional health and farm stress. That was very prevalent over the last several years. And it's difficult now with the increasing fertilizer prices, the cost of production to put things in the ground, even though those prices are very high. It's very, very turbulent times. So wanted to connect those dots, and even we've had educators work with Friends of Pine River, right?
Yes, you are.
Erica Rogers. So we're all over the place. Those little dots connect, and just wanted to make sure that they connect those, so when you come to August 2nd, that you realize that, and it's just good information to have. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We certainly give our thanks to all these organizations for the service they provide to our citizens. It's really very helpful and very beneficial to everyone. You know, jobs and mental health and everything else all goes together there. So it's hard to separate all those pieces. Anyone else like to address the commission? Les, rebuttal time.
No.
Well, that's a different topic before, so he gets a fresh one.
Again, Les Roseanne, 889 Mill Street here in Monmouth. Regarding the fence along, I've ridden by there on a bicycle for however long that was going up and wondered what the purpose was. I was glad to hear their explanation for it. My hope is that the family who paid for that and who sculpted, had that iconic piece of artwork sculpted and placed, you can't see that. With that one section of you cannot see that sculpture. That's got vandalism going to be happening written all over it. And I would hope that the family was consulted with the concerns regarding the headlights shining in the homes. The trail is basically closed at dusk. I don't know how many cars are actually in there. That's a trailhead parking at night, except some of us do night rides occasionally. But I think if the family hasn't been consulted, I think that would be a very good gesture because they paid for it. And I don't know how much money they put into it, but it wasn't a cheap. You don't get a piece of artwork as iconic as that one is without a lot of expense. So whatever you come up with, I would hope that that sculpture is still visible from the street. And you're not blocking the view of something that they paid thousands of dollars to put up. So the other thing is that I had, having been actively involved with Freedom of Information Act requests from different agencies, my experience in the past when I was doing professional investigative work was that Alamo was pretty fair and reasonable. Greg, you made a comment that kind of got my gander up a little bit. You said to discourage. I don't think that's the right word to use, discourage, and I don't know what kind of FOIA request you're getting, but if you say you're trying to discourage anybody from filing a FOIA, I think that's going in the wrong direction, because there are departments and agencies that will do what they can do to discourage people from obtaining those. And as far as you said something about higher level obviously have to review it, but a lot of the FOIA requests, police reports, simple stuff. I mean, the law states that the lowest paid employee capable of doing the work can do it. You can't charge Eric's if one of his assistants or his intern can do the same job. You have to use that lowest paid employee. The other thing, though, that cities can do, and most of them don't, you can roll into that all your roll-up costs. So you have a person working on a FOIA request, the time spent also has vacation time, comp time, sick time, health insurance. You can roll all of those in. That will discourage people from filing FOIA, but it also leaves a bad taste in their mouth because the person's not, if they're not doing a FOIA request, it's not costing the city anymore. And if you're just paying for the time, that's one thing, but they're going to get paid. Your roll-up costs are there, whether they're doing a FOIA request or on a coffee break. So I just, having gone up against Gratiot County when they didn't have a FOIA program in place, Midland County when they didn't have one, they didn't have a FOIA officer. There are reasons that that law exists. And Michigan, fortunately, is a much better state than some of the others, such as Alabama, where I've spent 6 months or close to 6 months. But I just, don't discourage. I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, but that was a wrong word. So, thank you.
And my reference, and we really haven't had any conversations about FOIA requests around here, but in my imagination, you know, some people, you know, especially if things are free, you request just everything rather than information that's actually needed. So if you could narrow your focus, like Eric had stated, I think was probably a better way to term it, that was more my intention. That
Yeah,
you
it
can
was,
get them to
yes.
focus things down and instead of requesting the world.
I guess I should say this too.
And I think our fees are extremely low,
Well,
and
that's what I
even
was
with
gonna
the
say too,
increase,
And I appreciate what Les said
I
about.
don't think we're trying to recoup everything.
I think the city of Alma is very reasonable, and if you read the policy, it is very reasonable. There are, you know, we're doing things for free to the extent that we can. People have a certain number of requests that are, you know, that where we're not charging much of anything, if anything. And we're really not changing the policy. This is more about the, you know, the forms and the documentation on our end to help assess costs in those situations where you really need to. Because some of these requests take up a lot of time. Go ahead, I mean, people, they file what they're gonna file. We're not discouraging anything. But if you're going to do that and it's gonna cost the city that kind of money, and the state law is very clear on what we have to prove, but if we can prove it, we've got to recoup those costs. And that's really, I think, what was the impetus for this. I think the city is very accommodating with respect to FOIA, and we will continue to be. It's just that on some of these more onerous requests where it's taken up a lot of time, we need to get paid.
State law allows an agency, government agency, to say, okay, here's what it's going to cost you.
Correct.
We want payment in advance, I don't know what the
Yeah,
factor
well,
is.
the policy covers all of that, and that, yeah, and on rare occasions, that's what has to happen, I mean, because it is an inordinate amount of time and expense.
We don't have the luxury of a department that we can assign and say, oh, this is our cost for doing this. It's just a piece of his job here, a piece of maybe Chief
Yes.
Overla's job there,
Yes.
and the fire chief
Right.
job.
And then you gotta do it within the time allotted too, which, you
Yes.
know, which is difficult sometimes.
And my understanding, and I don't know a lot about this FOIA stuff, but, you know, a big piece of that, I think, is protecting information that might be in there that's somebody else's private information, in a police
There are
report or
exemptions.
in.
There are exemptions that say-
So those things, and that's why I think it takes a higher level in many cases, is
Know
you've
what
gotta
to
make sure
redact.
you're protecting
Know
the
what to
innocent,
redact.
so to speak, before you hand out somebody's information. Just-
I've not been billed for a FOIA from the city of Alma, I don't remember how long, and I'm pretty regular about it.
Right.
Who does the invoicing? Can we get, where's your address again?
That's,
Quick
that's,
to respond, and I don't get a bill,
Yeah.
I mean, Gratiot County, I get a bill every time in the sheriff's department,
Yeah,
so.
And we're not intending to be punitive
No.
or stop anybody from making requests.
It's just that when you
That is
get to a
never-
certain level, you know, of material that's being requested, and depending how difficult it is to ferret out what you're not supposed to send and what you
Yeah.
are, we just need to recoup costs.
And it, you know, if you're requesting it, presumably it has some value to you,
Sure.
and you should, you know, like anything you buy, if it has value to you, you should expect to pay for it. That's not unreasonable, so. Okay. Thank you for your comments, though, Les, appreciate that. And my intention was not to discourage people from getting
I
information
didn't
they
think it
needed.
was, but I just wanted to point that out.
I would never,
Having gone through that with
Yeah.
several agencies, Gratiot County was one of the most onerous ones imaginable when I first started. And ended up going to the city commission, or the county commission. They didn't have a FOIA policy, so they couldn't bill a dime. You don't have a published and prepared and published and publicly available policy. You cannot charge them. So,
makes sense. You can't blindside people, that isn't fair either. So, okay. Anybody else like to address the commission? Everybody want to go home? Okay, with that, we'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
so moved. Support.
A motion support, all those in favor be yes?
Yes.
Any opposed, no? Motion is passed, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining.